Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I just started. I love it when you crack yourself up. I just switched to a new podcast app called Overcast instead of just like the old Apple Podcast app. And one of the things on there is a setting where it will like auto detect silence and just like skip over it. So if you're using that app, and based on the first 20 seconds of the show, I would strongly recommend it. You would have no idea how long Tony waited if Tony's just padding this out to get an extra commercial break in or something. I mean, who's to say? But yes, Overcast app. Brought to you by Tony and Awkward Pauses.
I don't think it was awkward. It was just a pause. But I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I also am doing okay as we prepare for the icy white death of whatever Thursday has for us in store here in, I'd say, Central Ohio, Central America, Central United States of America, or the Midwest, as you call it, maybe, Tom. So, No. So it's going to be something. So, yeah. But anyway, that's neither here nor there right now. Today, Tom, we are talking about the Jim Harbaugh situation, which I know we touched briefly on it in a previous show, but it sure seems like this is happening. And as we record right now, I don't even know what is Wednesday. This is Wednesday, like 1:23 p.m. He interviewed today with Minnesota. No decision has been made. So we are working on this information, and no information has been made. But the fact that he is interviewing on signing day, he is, not making any of this a secret. He wants to be back in the NFL, and there is a team that he is interviewing with. And there was a report on Tuesday saying the offer is there from the Vikings. He's going to accept it today. While that news hasn't necessarily broken yet, it was from Chris Ballas, who's a well-known Michigan reporter, so it's not like that's just coming from an egg on Twitter. This is a legitimate dude reporting this, so I think once that hit, then it's like, okay, well, this is definitely happening, and it's gone beyond speculation, and while it hasn't happened yet, Tom, it sure seems like it's happening, unless Minnesota says,
Yeah, it seems like Harbaugh has made up his mind that he's going to leave if the job is offered, and now it's just a matter of will Minnesota's presumably ownership group, but that sounds like that's kind of the last group to sign off on Harbaugh. If Minnesota's ownership group will sign off on him, then there is no question that he's going to leave. And I think this is somewhat in line with what our thinking has been the last week or so, where you've kind of had people ping-ponging back and forth between, oh, it's 80-20 he stays, and oh, boy, it's 60-40 he goes. And it has always seemed like he was very open about this. He's a different kind of dude. He is not the slink around and deny the reports and, Nick Saban with the Dolphins saying there's no, whatever. There's no chance I'm going to coach Alabama and then going to coach Alabama like 3 days later, whatever it was. He's not that guy. He has always been a little bit of a different dude. And there has been no real attempt to hide the fact that he's interested in going to the NFL, and this is not, this one job is such a perfect fit that I have to. It's just, okay, I would love to go coach the Raiders, but I'd also love to coach the Vikings, or, I don't know, maybe the Bears, if the Bears will take me, or, if Stephen Ross from Miami says he wants, like, that's fine, I'll take, whatever. Like, he wants to get back to the NFL. You get the sense that he feels like this is the best opportunity he's going to have to get back to the NFL. Like, the getting's not going to get any better next year, so he'd better get while the getting's good. And, to do this on National Signing Day, I know National Signing Day is not what it has been in the past. Like, this is not nearly as impactful as it would have been before, but, the optics on that are, the last week before National Signing Day, you've been jetting around and chatting with NFL teams instead of, trying to add another player to your class or, any of that stuff. The optics aren't great on that, and it all points very much to, man, he is, as soon as he has another option, he is out that door.
Yeah, the Vikings may be having a signing of the star today to call back to Michigan's signing of the stars. I think was that in 2015 or 2016?
16, yeah.
With their recruiting class. Now, my theory a day or two or three ago was that, Stephen Ross at Miami said he wasn't going to pull Jim Harbaugh out of Michigan. He's not going to pull him away from Michigan. He's going to leave him alone while he's doing his own coaching search. But that he did want Jim Harbaugh, and once Harbaugh made it known to everybody else by interviewing with the Vikings and talking about the Raiders or whatever, that he has made a decision to leave Michigan. So Stephen Ross would come in and say, okay, now I can hire him, and I'm not actually taking him from Michigan because he has already left. I am just giving him a job that he wants. Then the Brian Flores stuff comes out on Wednesday or Tuesday, and it's almost like the Miami job maybe is not as appealing as it once was, because who knows what all is going to be going on with Ross and the franchise at this moment. So maybe that takes his ultimate, his number one option off the table. And now if the Vikings is the only job available and he's not the only person being interviewed, then it creates a very uncomfortable situation should Minnesota choose to go another way. But if we're going to go with the Ballas report that Minnesota has essentially made the offer and he's just going to take it, then there's no drama. But Tom, what happens if he's left at the Minnesota altar and to mix metaphors, all of the music has stopped and now all of the chairs are occupied? Obviously, he can. I've seen people say, well, yeah, it's awkward to go back to Michigan, but he's an awkward guy, so it really wouldn't be all that awkward.
And that feels kind of about right. Just like, well, I'm back. Who was it that... was it Costanza that quit his job and then came back then on Monday? What, you thought I was serious? No. I just heard Minneapolis was lovely in early February. That's all. Was that apparently I was misinformed. It's actually pretty chilly up there. I heard it was a beach town. No, apparently not. At this point, I guess the thing is, if he doesn't leave this year, when is he going to leave? So if he doesn't leave this year, this is going to get used against them in recruiting forever and a day, because it has been, like I said, it has been very obvious. There's been no attempt to hide the fact that he's interested in leaving. So, how are you going to sell people on the fact that, oh, no, I'm here for the long haul? But it's not like they're going to fire him after this, because who was the BC coach? Was it Jeff Jagodzinski, who they fired because he went to after the Green Bay Packers job or something?
Giants, I think.
Or was it the Giants job? Yeah. Some NFL job. And they fired him, and then he never got any kind of meaningful head coaching job again. And also BC football kind of went into the toilet for a while after that. He had them kind of trending upward, and then they went right down back into the crapper again. That's not really a great result for anyone. So I guess they would kind of just have that awkward, dad was running around town, and then there's sort of I guess we're going to have the awkward, reunion, and we're all going to try and make this work again for the kids. That's going to be hard, and that's going to be, I would think, a major blow to their recruiting. But if he doesn't, it feels like at this point, whatever the result is, it is really going to increase the variability for future seasons of Michigan football. The floor might be a lot lower than it was, because either he leaves, and then you have, they kind of know what they have with him at this point. Mm-hmm. So either he leaves, and you have a much more high variability coach, whether it's Josh Gaddis or Bill O'Brien or Mike Hart or Matt Campbell, whoever it is, or you have him back and it's oh boy, what is this going to do to recruiting? Because recruiting has not been tremendous there, and it's just getting better. And this is the season when you should see the big payoff, the year after you have the Big Ten championship run and the college football playoff. And I don't know if you're going to see that this year because of what's happened since that Sugar or the Orange Bowl.
I think knowing what they have in Jim Harbaugh, and I think Jim Harbaugh took Michigan as far as he could this year, and it took him a long time to do it, and there are some valleys in there. If he's at this point, I wonder if he would even come back, even if there's no job. Would he come back? And also, would Michigan just be you know what? we know what we had in you. We thank you for your service, but we can get that from other people too. And those people won't be looking next year and the year after. And this is going elsewhere as a way to solidify that. And so I wonder if maybe, and I don't know that this is likely, where they would just agree, I think we're done. I think, we had a good run. It feels like if the Vikings thing doesn't happen, that he's just going to come back. But I wonder, the better option would be like, you know what? We've already started thinking about who we were going to go get. And the more we start thinking about it, we like what we could do there. Or we like the Harbaugh in the hand versus the 6 or 7 guys in the bush that it could be instead. I don't know how you look at these two and think that you can't do better than Jim Harbaugh.
Well, and, this would not be the first time that a Michigan coach was looking elsewhere and then kind of got shoved out the door as a result. Because, was it Bill Frieder, the basketball coach back in 1989, who I think went to take the Arizona State job and was interviewing for the Arizona State job or something, and Bo Schembechler, who at that point was the AD at Michigan, fired him and hired Steve Fisher. And, very famously said, a Michigan man will coach Michigan. Because, if you're halfway out the door, that's fine. You were persona non grata now. And then Steve Fisher went and, was that 89? Was that the year with the Ramil Robinson Seton Hall year? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, right? Yeah. And they went and win the national championship with an interim coach. So, there would be some precedent for that. I don't know that they're necessarily guaranteed to find someone who can give them what Harbaugh gave them. Because we can have a whole separate conversation about Michigan and what the ceiling for the Michigan program is right now. But it feels like Harbaugh has gotten them pretty close to the ceiling of the Michigan program. And there have been a whole lot of coaches over the last 30 years who have not gotten them to the ceiling of the Michigan program. So I don't know if, some of the potential candidates, and maybe we'll get into them a little later as well, but I don't know if all of those candidates are going to be able to give them what Harbaugh gave them, because this was a little bit of all the stars are aligned to give you this season, but that's not something that happens very often, and I don't know if they really are likely to find someone who can get all those stars to align again for them.
I'm trying to think back, and I wonder if I ever thought Jim Harbaugh would get them to the playoffs. I think I probably assumed it would eventually happen. Mm-hmm. Certainly didn't expect it to happen this year, prior to this year. Like, wasn't thinking, they're going to be a playoff team heading during the preseason. But I think what he's done is basically what Lloyd Carr did, and what Rich Rod didn't. What Rich Rod would have done if they would have kept him in a couple more years. What Brady Hoke did in his first year or so. So that they touched on it, but I think Jim Harbaugh was more of what Lloyd Carr was, and really what Bo Schembechler was. And again, I think we said this before, like, Jim Harbaugh is going to take Michigan back to where they were, and it's like, but I don't think people understand where that is. That's 9-3, and that's what he's done. And so I obviously it's a hit or miss type of thing in terms of who can they get, who would take it right now, who is interested. The market is kind of closed a little bit. Like, Lincoln Riley's set, and this guy's set, and all of these guys have moved around. But and maybe one of the problems with this job is that it's a 9-3 job, but everybody says it's like an 11-1 job.
Well, and you know what? 11-1 is a fascinating conversation, because I went back and looked at this, and 1975 was the year that the Big Ten started letting another team go to a bowl game. Before that, it was just you were the champion and you went to the Rose Bowl, or you sat at home. So 1975 was the first year that they let another team, a second Big Ten team, go to a bowl game. So that was the year 1975. Bo Schembechler in Michigan. They lost to Ohio State. That was Archie Griffin's senior season. So they went to the Orange Bowl, lost that game, finished 8-2-2. Since the 1975 season, since that Big Ten expanded their bowl opportunities from one to more than one, I will spot you this. Ohio State has had 14 seasons with 1 or 0 losses and ties. Like, losses plus ties combined, Ohio State has had 14 seasons with 1 or 0. How many seasons has Michigan had?
Well, they had a You say include no, you're just talking losses because they had an undefeated season with three ties.
Yes, losses and ties combined of 0-1. So like the 1992 9-0-3, 1992 9-0-3 season would not count. You had 3 ties.
They ended up losing that second game in 2006, if I recall. So I'll just say 1.
The correct answer is 1. Yes, 1997, and that was it. And I remember years and years ago, you had I think it was Amani Toomer, the former Michigan wide receiver, former New York Giants wide receiver, had a tweet during one of the coaching transitions where it's like, 9-4, 8-3. This is not what Michigan is. And you went back and screenshotted Michigan's record during his 4 years in Ann Arbor, and it was like 8-4, 8-4, 9-4, 8-4, or something like that. It was like, you think this isn't what you are. But this is literally, you are what your record says you are, and this is what your record says you are. And I'm sure that everyone is looking at this and going, well, these people cover Ohio State. Of course, they're going to talk down Michigan. I didn't invent record keeping. I'm very sorry, but that's how this goes. And, you look at, I saw someone earlier today describe Michigan as a regional power, but not a national power. And that's about right. They are a very consistently top 2, top 3 over the decades team in the Big Ten. But then here, let's just read down their bowl record. Under Bo Schembechler, lost the Rose, lost the Rose, lost the Orange, lost the Rose, lost the Rose, lost the Rose, lost the Gator, won the Rose, won the Bluebonnet, lost the Rose, lost the Sugar, lost the Holiday, won the Fiesta, lost the Rose, won the Hall of Fame Bowl, won the Rose, lost the Rose. That's the Bo Schembechler era. And that's like the golden hallowed era of Michigan football. And, Lloyd Carr lost the Alamo, lost the Outback, won the Rose, won the Citrus, won the Orange, won the Citrus. That got you to 2000. Lost the Citrus, won the Outback, lost the Rose, lost the Alamo, lost the Rose, won the Capital One Bowl. And then Harbaugh won the Citrus, lost the Orange, lost the Outback, lost the Peach, lost the Citrus, lost the Orange. That's a lot of losses. Anytime you're playing a team from another part of the country, you're losing a lot of those games, and it's just that's kind of what the ceiling is. And there's lots of theories as to why that is, and Michigan fans can't wait to tell you about the academics, and they can't get everyone in, and the virginal purity of the school that had the Fab Five, and yada yada yada. But it's whatever you want to chalk it up to, the ceiling is there. That's the ceiling. I'm not making it up. It's right there in front of you. So it feels like Harbaugh kind of got them there. Harbaugh recognized this is it. I'm leaving the school in as good a position as I could, and now I'm leaving. That's just kind of how this all tracks to me.
Well, I will say, you going through these bowl wins, you went really fast over that Bluebonnet win. Okay, I'm just going to say that you did not spend nearly enough time on that one.
I'm going to pull that one up because let's see, it was the 1981 Astro Bluebonnet Bowl down in Houston. They beat UCLA. Who says Bo Schembechler can't beat a Pac-12 team? 20 points in the third quarter. Boy, that was a 13-7 game after 3 quarters. That was a humdinger. They played, I guess technically, if you want to say, they played in the national championship game in 1984 in the Holiday Bowl as a 6-6 team. They lost to BYU, who won the national championship in a 24-17 game, I think. It's just you get to a certain point, and that certain point is very good. I think Penn State's kind of running into this right now too, where you get to a certain point and you're pretty good, but James Franklin's thing about good but not elite. That's kind of what Michigan has been. They get to a certain point, and it's good, maybe very good, and then there's the elevator doesn't go to the floors that are higher than this, so I guess I have to switch elevators if I want to get to a higher floor.
So we've seen Michigan make the playoffs. We have not seen Penn State make the playoffs. I kind of think that Penn State may have the higher ceiling because of the recruiting footprint that they have. That makes life a little bit more difficult for Michigan, unless they were to really attack Ohio more and really do what Lloyd Carr and Bo Schembechler were able to do. I feel like there's a higher upside for not James Franklin, but somebody if the same guy is coaching at Penn State or Michigan, and say it's whomever, I feel like that guy has a higher upside at Penn State. But Tom, I want you to go through some of these names, and you just tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least likely, 10 being most likely that he would be an option or would accept the job or would think about it. If you don't even hit 5, we'll just move on. We won't even examine it, okay?
So this is would accept the job?
Yeah, 10. Well, would be interested. Would listen.
Okay.
So, first one, Luke Fickle.
2, and that might be high. I mean, he's the one, like, it's like, you always hear people say that, well, this guy went to this school. He wouldn't ever consider. And, like, no, I mean, Gary Mueller was an Ohio State captain and ended up being the head coach at Michigan. Beauchamp Buckler was an assistant under Woody Hayes and ended up being the head coach at Michigan. Like, that's not something that is necessarily as big a hang-up for coaches as it is necessarily for fans. But I think Luke Fickle might be the exception, just based on everything you hear from everyone who knows him. It's just like, he would take the Penn State job. He would take the Notre Dame job. He's not taking the Michigan job.
Pat Fitzgerald.
I think he would have to listen, because he's another guy who maybe has kind of bumped up against the ceiling, but I don't know if he seems like someone who is in like that Mark Stoops kind of job security range, where it's like, you don't have to win the conference to have fantastic jobs. Like, how many bad years in a row does Pat Fitzgerald need to have before he gets fired? I mean, Pat Fitzgerald has had a bad year. He's probably going to have another bad year this year. I think he still has a longer leash at Northwestern than he would at Michigan. He could have 3 bad years at Michigan and get fired. I don't know that he's, I think he would be smart to listen, but I would completely understand that he doesn't. So I'll say 5 or 6 on him, because I think he could get them to a certain, he could at least get them back to the Harbaugh kind of level, like a 10-2 kind of level, pretty somewhat consistently. But yeah, what do you think? Is he? Because I'm kind of talking myself in circles on him a little bit, and whether he would, really seriously consider leaving Michigan, leaving Northwestern.
You say he's bumping up against the ceiling, and I kind of think he's comfortable with that. And he knows, not that he's lazy or anything, but he understands that this is part of life at Northwestern. It's all he's ever known. So yeah, there's going to be some 4-8 seasons, and that's just part of the process to getting to 9-3 or 10-2. And so it's almost like a 4-8 season isn't a season. It's just part of the process to getting to a 10-2 season 2 years later. Like, these are 3 or 4 year increments instead of every season is its own thing. And I don't know that he would necessarily change at Michigan and would continue to recruit maybe the same guys. And that's always a bad sign when you make Rich Rodriguez made the same mistake. You make the step up and you still recruit the same guys you did before. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. Just ask every assistant coach that comes to Ohio State, and they say, my shirt gets me into every school now except for Alex Grinch. But these guys, with Pat Fitzgerald, I don't think, I know everybody loves him, and people swear he's the only guy that could be doing what he's doing at Northwestern. I disagree. I think he could. How many seasons could he have? Like, how many 4-8 seasons could he have in a row? I'd say at least 5. And then if he's not tired of it by that point, and like, it's. I think he becomes comfortable with that, and really, I think he's maybe overrated as a candidate. But I'd like to see what he could do. But I don't know that he would be any kind of necessarily a huge upgrade over Jim Harbaugh, where he also had his fluctuations, and that's all Pat Fitzgerald understands.
And the interesting part of this conversation is the recent report that the Big Ten was looking at doing away with divisions, because the good Northwestern season right now is 9-3, but they win a 7-way tiebreaker in the Big Ten West and go to Indianapolis, and it's like, oh, hamburgers, we lost to Ohio State again. But hey, we got to go to Indianapolis, and we're going to go play in the Outback Bowl or the Citrus Bowl or whatever it is. If you're not in divisions anymore, then maybe Michigan's path to Indianapolis gets easier. Northwestern's path to Indianapolis gets harder, and maybe that changes the calculus a little bit on his end. Because that's, it's hard to make a job decision based on something that could maybe happen, but it sounds like it's plausibly to likely going to happen. So, maybe that is something that would factor into his thinking, but I don't know if it factors in enough to get him to leave a place that's more or less all he's ever known.
Like Lincoln Riley left when he knew Oklahoma was going to the SEC. He's like, I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pat Fitzgerald doesn't necessarily have that information yet. Number 3 on the list, my number 1 guy overall. This is my number 1 pick for Michigan. And your immediate answer is going to be 1, as in no chance, but I think it would be a winner. Lane Kiffin.
Can I give that a 1 on Michigan's side as to whether Michigan would offer him the job? I mean, but believe me, there's nothing I would love more than to cover. Think about how much grist for the mill we've gotten out of the Michigan coaching staff since the Ohio State game, and how many shows we've gotten out of that. Mm-hmm. Do you think Lane Kiffin would have some thoughts on the rivalry with Ohio State? I suspect that he would. Do you think Lane Kiffin would be willing to vocalize those? I suspect that he would. So yes, there's no one I would love to see coaching Michigan more than Lane Kiffin, purely for off-field reasons. I don't think that would be a good cultural fit. Let's just leave it at that. Lane Kiffin, honestly, might, Lane Kiffin is more likely to, I'm not going to say 1 on Lane Kiffin's side. Lane Kiffin, I think, wants out of Oxford because he recognizes that's not a sustainable thing with Texas A&M weaponizing and Alabama and LSU and all those. I think Lane Kiffin would be more willing to listen to Michigan than Michigan would be to listen to Lane Kiffin.
I've been feeling like Lane Kiffin might ultimately be Nick Saban's successor at Alabama.
In this scenario, what has happened to Dabo Swinney? Is he trapped under something heavy?
Dabo is never leaving Clemson because he's everything stays in house at Clemson, including him. He has become a shut-in at Clemson and doesn't bring in spring official visitors. I don't think he would have to change. Honestly, mm-hmm. I know he's saying Clemson this, Clemson that, but obviously being former Alabama receiver, he would have to change how he operates. You're going to have to use the transfer portal. You're going to have to bring in spring official visits. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that. And it's all of this stuff that we don't do that here at Clemson. And it's like, well, I see why you were nowhere on the radar after game 1 this past season.
Yeah, he would have to change how he operates. And I don't know that Kiffin would have to, but I think the argument against Dabo taking the Alabama job is don't be the idiot who coaches after Nick Saban, because there's no possible way to live up to that. Be the guy who coaches after the guy. So, Kiffin, again, I don't know if Alabama would offer the job to Kiffin. I think he has a very specific niche of teams that would be willing to tolerate Lane Kiffin's Lane Kiffinness. In the pursuit of wins. I don't know if Alabama is going to be one of those.
The number 4 guy on this list might be my actual real number 1 legitimate possibility, and I don't know that it actually is. Dave Aranda at Baylor.
Yeah, he's an interesting one because again, he got them to they won the Big 12 championship game this year and that's a pretty impressive thing to have done. But, have you kind of topped out at Baylor and, with Texas and Oklahoma on the way out the door, is that a more appealing job because you have a much more wide open conference that you could, potentially win a whole bunch. And if you win the conference, then you get into the playoff, assuming the playoff expands as we're all sort of expecting in the coming years. Or is it less appealing because the amount of money coming into that program is probably going to be shrinking quite a bit after Oklahoma and Texas leave? I don't know what he thinks about that. Does he have ties to the North in any way? I don't think of him as a Northern guy, really. He was at Wisconsin,
right? But I know he's reportedly turned down a couple of other big-time offers just in this off season. So I know that's why some people don't think he's an option. But he's a very serious, meticulous dude that I think would do well at Michigan. I mean, if you win the Big 12 at Baylor, I think you could. Now, I don't know how exciting he is or anything like that, but really just stay out of your own way and don't ruin the players that you're bringing in. And sometimes Jim Harbaugh has a hard time doing that.
Well, he'd be interesting because they just lost Mike McDonald, so you need a defensive coordinator. So you bring in a defensive head coach, and then you have Josh Gaddish be the assistant head coach in charge of the offense or whatever. And assuming Gaddish would be willing to stay, if Gaddish is not. Hire me or I leave kind of thing as the head coach. Aranda, I think, would be a great hire for them. He is not necessarily a win the press conference hire, but that's a hire that fans kind of go, huh, when it happens, and then 12 to 18 months later, like, wow, that was a really good hire. I'll put him at like maybe a 5 or a 6 again. I don't know. I don't know how happy he is at Baylor, or if he's really looking for a way out. I don't know that I'm necessarily. I think I would have him in the conversation with another current Big 12 head coach that I think we'll be probably talking about in a minute. I think both of them are kind of similar to me in a way, where they're kind of program builders and have done more with less. And then then the question is, are you willing to try and recruit at a higher level, or are you going to try and do the more with less thing at Michigan too, which you kind of touched on earlier?
I think he beats Michigan State. So I think that's a step up from Jim Harbaugh. Let's stay in the Baylor sphere. Matt Rule, currently the Carolina Panthers head coach, may be looking to move back to college before he gets fired at Carolina.
Yeah, and he's a Pennsylvania guy because he was a Penn State assistant for a while, and then the head coach at Temple, and then went to Baylor and was replaced by Matt Rule. And yeah, I feel like I look at him and I think a lot of the same stuff that I think about Aranda, like probably would be a good organizational head coach, probably would do pretty well. I don't know that he's a get them to the consistent top 4 kind of team level guy, and I don't know that there is one of those guys out there right now.
See James Franklin plus one, maybe, is he?
Yeah, he could be in that range. He's someone who I think you go through his record and it's like it's good, but it's not incredible at any point. And I think I might put him one tick below Aranda, maybe in the how dangerous would this person be as a Michigan head coach for the rest of the Big Ten. But he's someone who I would be. I think he would have to listen if he's, much like Harbaugh is looking to get out of Michigan while the getting is good. If Matt Rule has an opportunity to go back to a, top 10-ish program in college football, over the kind of long haul, I think that's something he would definitely have to think about. He may be more likely to make that jump than Aranda is.
Number 6 on the list, a name that's been popping up and down. Bill O'Brien, currently the offensive coordinator at Alabama. We know he was at Penn State. I think he did well enough at Penn State given their circumstances. And then he went to the Houston Texans to be their head coach and eventually got fired and headed back to the Alabama Reclamation Farm. And now maybe I'm guessing he would take it. Tom, where do you put him on a 1 through 10 possibility worth discussing?
In terms of him being willing to take it, he's probably about a 9.5, I would say. I mean, if you can leave a coordinator position and go be a head coach at a school that just came off a college football playoff berth in a region where you've coached before, yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty easy sell on their side. I don't know how he would do at Michigan. I mean, again, as you said, he did well enough at Penn State, but it's so hard to judge based on the situation that he inherited there, where he came in and they basically it was like just rubble everywhere when he came in, and they had I think they lost to Ohio University in his first year, and really struggled coming out of the gate, but he held them together well enough. I don't know that he's. Is he a better coach? Does he get that program to a better spot than Penn State, or is that just like it's Penn State, the Penn State Ann Arbor campus? Because it feels like I don't know that they get that Michigan under Bill O'Brien is any better than Penn State under James Franklin, and it might not even be that good.
Yeah, I think we've kind of seen what he can do, and is that really. Does that move the needle for Michigan? And I guess it depends on the other candidates. Maybe the top candidate for a lot of people, maybe the first guy that a lot of people say is Matt Campbell, the Iowa State head coach. That makes a lot of sense. From the area, coached at Toledo, knows the Midwest, is seemingly happy at Iowa State, but is always on the short list of everybody that talks about this, not necessarily everybody that does the hiring, and maybe not. I don't know how often he comes up with the search committees, but eventually, or does he have to leave Iowa State? Or now it's the same question with like Luke Fickle. Now with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, maybe now is the best time to stay in the Big 12.
He had a lot of seniors on last year's team. I think a lot of his production from last year is gone, so they might be in line for a big step back this year. And you wonder if he's in that spot where you're kind of bumping up against the ceiling of what Iowa State can be, because they are, they were what, 8-4, 7-5 this year, something like that, and they've had 9 win teams. I don't think they've won 10 games yet in any of his seasons. But if you look historically, what he's doing at Iowa State is like a complete historical anomaly. And that's one of those things where eventually the program is going to turn back into a pumpkin, almost certainly. You can't sustain that without a real in-state recruiting base to lean on. You're kind of duct tape and baling wire that whole thing for to get together, to get to the point where you're an 8-9 win team. And then once you have a bad season, if they backslide to 5-7, 4-8 next year because they're losing all that talent, then all of a sudden the bloom is off the rose, and then you've got to rebuild the whole thing again. And maybe you get back up to that 8-9 win level, and maybe you don't. He seems to me like someone who should be actively looking for something at this point, like capitalize on, look, man, you have done an incredible job there. That is not going to be a sustainable thing forever. I think you have to try and move on and make that jump when you can. He'd be he's another guy who'd be a very, very good. I would view him as a very good hire for Michigan. He knows the Midwest. I think would probably change the recruiting philosophy to more of a Midwest-based recruiting area, which then there's all sorts of interesting conversations there about how does that impact a school like Kentucky. If Kentucky no longer gets that second level of talent in Ohio and Ohio and Indiana and Western Pennsylvania, and Michigan gets them instead, how does that impact the Michigan program? How does it impact the Kentucky program and Michigan State and some of those others? So I would be very intrigued by Matt Campbell. There are certainly limitations there. He has not beaten Iowa yet, as far as I'm aware, since he's been at Iowa State. I think that's one of those big things that's kind of hanging around his neck right now, but I think he would do a very good job. They would not fall off a cliff with Matt Campbell, but I don't. That's another one where is he going to get you? Is he going to get you to 12-0 and then you win the Big Ten championship game and you go into the playoffs as the number 1 seed? I don't know that he's getting them there, but he probably keeps the floor from falling out too.
Yeah, my concern with him is he's always able to get his team up for some game that maybe they shouldn't win, and he gets credit for that. But then they also lose games they shouldn't lose, and then the players kind of get the blame for that. So I wonder if that just continues even at Michigan, where you're going to have all of the means to be able to win the big games, but you also randomly, you shouldn't have lost at Minnesota this year, or Minnesota shouldn't have beaten you in Ann Arbor, because there's some bad stuff like that where it just shouldn't happen, and I think it happens a little too often for Matt Campbell, but also that kind of stuff should happen at Iowa State, so I don't really know how much blame to give him, but we also give him all of the credit. We give him very little of the blame and all of the credit, and I don't know that that's correct either.
Well, and I guess the question is, so if he's going to win the games win some of the games he's not supposed to, but lose some of the games he's not supposed to, would they trade an extra loss to Indiana or an extra loss to Maryland every couple of years for an extra win over Ohio State or Michigan State? I kind of feel like maybe, yes, they probably would do that. And, the flip side of that is, again, he has not beaten Iowa yet. So, the in-state rival question is sort of an open question hanging over his head a little bit. And it's not like Iowa has been exactly Alabama the last few years. So that's a little bit of a question as well. But, I think if you told Michigan fans, you're going to lose to Minnesota in 2 years, and you're going to feel real bad about it, but then you're going to beat Ohio State, they're going to take that 100 times out of 100. Now, is that a trade that is really going to be, in the offing? That's a whole separate question. But, if I don't know that in and of itself would be enough to keep me from hiring him.
All right, and I don't want to go on too much longer. I've got 4 other names here, but 2 of them are Josh Gaddis and Mike Hart, which are kind of the same thing. But one here that is maybe sneaky, and you mentioned him a little earlier, Mark Stoops. Maybe then you get him to bring along Vince Marrow with him, and now you get into that Ohio recruiting, and he's a solid guy, has been able to win, been able to not get fired at Kentucky, playing in the SEC East, which is not, it's not the best division, but also other people are trying. So there is at least that. They don't do very well, but they try. And he's been able to stay afloat doing that. I don't know how much of an upgrade he is, though, or would be.
Yeah, and before we move on from Matt Campbell, I do want to just say I think Matt Campbell. If I'm Matt Campbell, I'm sure if Michigan offers a job, you take it. I still think the most natural fit for Matt Campbell is the Nebraska job a year from now. That's where it just like that seems like a spot where, being the 9-3 team or the 8-4 team is going to be a massive upgrade. And I think all the organizational stuff that he does and being able to recruit in an area that's not a real talent-rich area, that's the spot where I have always thought he would be the best next head coach, not Michigan. Stoops is an interesting one because Stoops kind of does at Kentucky what Harbaugh has done at Michigan. In the good years, it's like, well, they're 10-2, and they go to a New Year's Day bowl game, and they don't beat the very best teams on their schedule, but they win 9-10 games, and you're doing that at Kentucky, which is not a place that has historically done that. So he's maybe Matt Campbell in a better conference in a lot of ways. I don't know if you can pry Mark Stoops out of Lexington, because Mark Stoops has a pretty good gig. I think his contract is something like every time he wins 7 or 8 games, it automatically rolls over for another year. It's just like he just kind of has this contract in perpetuity at this point. And it's a basketball school, so it's like they're interested in football, but it's not, if you go 7-5, it's not the end of the world because basketball season's coming. I think he's got a pretty good gig there. I think he knows he has a pretty good gig there. So that might not be quite as easy to haul him out of there as you might think. But if they could, that potentially changes some things on the recruiting trail in the state of Ohio. If Vince Marrow is trying to sell Michigan instead of Kentucky, that I think would not. I don't necessarily think that puts Michigan ahead of Ohio State, but I think it makes things a little more challenging for Ohio State on the recruiting trail and then on the field in November as a result.
Yeah, I mean, you go into Ohio, and really there's not going to be a lot of clashing between Kentucky and Ohio State in Ohio on the recruiting trail. You put Stoops and Vince Marrow in Michigan, and now you're going to have to work harder for C.J. Hicks. You're going to have to work harder for Sonny Styles, like guys like that. Well, they're going to be Buckeyes, obviously, but it's like, well, this makes it a little bit more difficult. So I think I 2 10-win seasons in the last 4 years at Kentucky, but then 8 wins and 7 wins outside of that. That's not that far off from Michigan. You're right. Last one, Tom, and we can also discuss Josh Gaddis and Mike Hart, but PJ Fleck, any chance?
I think you file him under the Lane Kiffin. I'm sure he would love to come to Michigan, but I'm not sure Michigan is when his name comes up on the caller ID. I'm not sure Ward Manuel's picking up the phone. I think PJ Fleck is a personality that may not play everywhere in college football, and I can't imagine that Michigan is putting oars on their helmets and. That just doesn't seem like it feels like he's kind of like he's at exactly the right level of a program where it's like, it's a big-ish school, but it's not really a power school, so he can get them to 9 wins every once in a while or 10 wins, and then he can be 6-6 sometimes, and that's okay. And but there's no one cares quite enough for them to be bothered by some of the crap he does. So I don't think he would be. I don't think that's a call Ward Manuel's picking up, put it that way.
Minnesota's also remember what happened when they thought they deserved more and fired Glenn Mason and how long it took them to get back to where he had them. So they kind of know their level, so that helps. And so, but Josh Gaddis, Mike Hart, is one of those two the next head coach out of this list of 11 guys, is the next head coach one of those two guys more likely, or do you think it's somebody else? Because I think right now, if I look at this and you go off the board if you want as well, I think the guys outside of the program have a higher ceiling, and not just these guys, but I think the higher ceiling is the higher known ceiling is outside of the program. I have questions if they go with Gaddis and Hart, just because we don't know what they would be as head coaches, so there's going to be concerns there. And I don't know that they would be any better, and I don't know that they wouldn't be markedly worse than Jim Harbaugh. I think it's a gigantic leap of faith if they stay in-house.
Yeah, the error bars are significantly bigger there on a Josh Gaddis hire or a Mike Hart hire. I can't imagine they're going to hire Mike Hart. I mean, he's been a position coach. That would be quite a jump in terms of responsibility. He only got back to Michigan last year, right? I mean, this is... Yeah, I know he played there. I know he knows the program. I know he loves the program. That would be quite a jump from position coach to head coach, to jump him over the coordinator who just won the Broyles Award. Like, I don't really see that happening. I think the last time I saw like some lines, and I don't remember where the lines were from, but or how therefore how legitimate they are. But I think Gaddis was kind of considered the favorite, which when you're coming off of a good season, the internal hire is kind of the, well, don't rock the boat, keep everything going. That's kind of the safe hire. And Gaddis, of those two, is the safer hire. But, I mean, a first-time head coach is just kind of, yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, you can be the really energetic recruiter and, the great assistant coach who everyone loves. And sometimes you turn out to be Kerry Combs as a coordinator. And sometimes you turn out to be Tim Brewster as a head coach. Like, that sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. Sometimes you're Ryan Day and sometimes you're Tim Brewster. Like, that's... And Day was the coordinator, so that is kind of the natural comp. Day was the offensive coordinator under Meyer. Gaddis the offensive coordinator under Harbaugh, so that's, sort of the similar move. Yeah, I mean, Gaddis could have the highest ceiling of anyone, but he might also have the lowest floor of any of the assistants we talked, the other coaches, external people we talked about. Because, if you have the energetic young African-American head coach who's, he could kill it on the recruiting trail and could really modernize the program if you get buy-in from the Michigan boosters and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that's what it takes to start bringing in top 5 classes and top 4 classes and starting to level the talent playing field with Ohio State. Maybe. Or maybe he's Tim Brewster. Like, there is a very wide, and you will not know, because being a head coach is so different than being a coordinator even. You're just, whenever we talk to coaches, head coaches about at Big Ten Media Days, about what do you miss about being an assistant? It's always coaching. Like, I miss actually being a coach, because the head coaching job is so much administrative nonsense and all sorts of events and people you don't really want to talk to and butts you have to kiss and all that nonsense. How would he do with that? No one really knows, because he hasn't had to do it, and that's kind of always the question with a first-time head coach. You don't tend to see first-time head coaches work out. When you get thrown in at the very, very deep end of the pool. Sometimes you get a Dabo Swinney, sometimes you get a Ryan Day, and sometimes it doesn't work at all, bringing in a first-time head coach at a very, very big, program. Was Clay Helton the first-time head coach? I feel like he was at USC. So. Yeah, you bring in someone at a very, very big program like that. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's just... you can get a Mark Helfrich, you can get a Larry Coker, like that, and it only takes one of those to really undo a lot of the good that the previous guy did.
And Lincoln Riley in that Ryan Day, good hire. Dabo took some time, and Clemson was very patient there. I wonder the difference between Gaddis and Day for me is, like, Day brought his offense. And installed his offense into Urban Meyer's team. Josh Gaddis tried to bring stuff and then eventually had to just go back to doing what Jim Harbaugh wanted to do, essentially. And so he hasn't really had an opportunity to really, I think, make his mark on the program, and maybe this will be his opportunity. Tom, anything else before we go?
No, I think we should get this done and get this posted before the news breaks that he's coming back and this is all outdated.
Yes, very, very much so. So thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you later. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for watching. And we will talk to you guys later.